Welcome to the Wisdom That Breathes channel. Across all our platforms, we try to share wisdom which is relevant and accessible to everyone. But on this particular platform, we go deeper into some of the ancient principles found within the scriptures. If you find some of the terminology difficult or inaccessible, then go over to our Keshava Swami YouTube channel where you'll be able to find other content which is perhaps more relatable. Thank you and enjoy the wisdom that breathes. The Srimad Bhagavatam explains that the world is like a river of names. This whole world is like a river, and all of us are like straws. And we're all floating down the stream of the river of names. And then at some point in the river, all of the pieces of straws meet for some time. And after some time, all of those pieces of straw disperse and all go in their own directions. So here we are this evening, or this afternoon, together, pieces of straw in the river of names. And as soon as this program concludes, we will all go in our different directions. I'm off to London. You can join me if you like. Otherwise, I'm sure you have many other wonderful places to go. But while we're here, it's all the arrangement of Krishna. And so we have a bit of an opportunity to discuss Bhagavad Gita. So I can try and share whatever thoughts I have. I wonder if any of you, I didn't come with a prepared speech in mind. So I don't know if any of you have anything that is on your mind or any question that is running through your heart or your consciousness at this time. If you would like to raise some point here, I'm willing to go in that direction. If anyone has anything that there. Okay, Toshan Prabhu has something. He's laughing, now I'm scared. Okay, tell us, what is on your mind? What is in your heart?
Well, thank you for coming, Maharaj. Thank you for the nice seminar yesterday about Vrindavan here in the temple. Really beautiful. I had a question yesterday, so it was regarding Vrindavan, the topic that you brought. And it is actually, what is the proper attitude or etiquette regarding imitating Vrindavan or the Brajabasis here in the Western world, like Amsterdam?
Okay.
The proper etiquette.
That was a dramatic soundtrack to accompany the... Okay, I think we have to go with your question after that just happened. So, okay, let's go with that. What I'm going to do though, Toshan Prabhu, with your permission, is I'm just going to backtrack a little bit because maybe everyone in the room is not familiar with Vrindavan and other aspects. So let me read a verse from the Bhagavad Gita talking about the concept of the spiritual world, where we are now, what the spiritual world is. And then I'll try to come into Vrindavan and answer your question. Is that okay? So the topic for today is the spiritual world. Is that an interesting topic?
Yes.
It's said in the spiritual world, every step is a dance, every word is a song, every act is an act which is driven by love. The spiritual world is a place in which reality exceeds our dreams. Whereas the material world is a place in which, our dreams are always higher than what the reality is. It always falls short. So the spiritual world is where we're meant to be. As spirit souls, we have three qualities. In Sanskrit, we say Sat, which means we're eternal. Eternal. Chit, which means we're sentient, we're conscious, and Ananda, which means we're full of happiness. These are the three qualities of the soul, and this is the three qualities of spiritual existence, where you find eternity, full consciousness, and where you find happiness. Then you can understand this is the spiritual world. How does every single fairy tale end in the world? They lived happily ever after. Now if you look at this statement, it's actually a deep theological statement. Because to live ever after means sat. To live, to be conscious, means chit. And to live, not just ever after, but to live happily ever after means ananda. So when the fairy tales say we lived happily ever after, what they're actually pointing to is the nature of the soul, the nature of spiritual existence. But does anyone live happily ever after in the material world? So if you really want to live happily ever after, you got to go to the spiritual world, because this world is asat, achit, and nirananda, is temporary, full of ignorance and unhappy. So in the 15th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna explains that the material world is a reflection of the spiritual world. He gives the example of a banyan tree. In Sanskrit, a banyan tree is known as ashvatha, which literally means that which will not be here tomorrow. So if you imagine there's a banyan tree, and then there's a body of water, and then there's a reflection of that banyan tree, then what Krishna says is that the spiritual world is like the original form of that banyan tree. And when we have material desire, the body of water is known as material desire, then what happens is the spiritual world is reflected, and the material world is created, in which everything is upside down, in which it seems to be like the spiritual existence, but the substance is lacking here. And so this world is like a photocopy of the original world. It resembles the spiritual world, but it lacks in substance. So in the 15th chapter, Krishna explains this whole analogy, and then Krishna tells Arjuna about the spiritual world. So I think you can repeat after me. It's very, very beautiful. Krishna tells Arjuna. So you can repeat after me. Tatad bhashayate shuryo Vashashanko napavakaha Yadgatva nanivartante Tadhama paramam mama Natad bhashayate shuryo Nashashanko napavakaha Yadgatva nanivartante Tadhama paramam mama. Okay, so this is what Krishna says to Arjuna. That supreme abode of mine is not illumined by the sun or moon, nor by fire or electricity. Those who reach it never return to this material world. Yadgatva na nivartante. We're in the material world right now, but once you go there, you don't come back again. One time Srila Prabhupada, he was in a place called Jhansi, and he was distributing the book Easy Journey to Other Planets. So he gave the book to one person, and the person said, "Oh, can I go to other planets if I read this book?" Prabhupada said, "Yes, you can go to the supreme planet." He said, "Wow, and I can go to the supreme planet." And then he said to Prabhupada, "And then can I come back to Jhansi?" Prabhupada said, "Wait." He said, No, can I come back here?" Prabhupada said, "No, yadgatva na nivartante. Once you go there, you don't come back." He said, "I can't come back?" He said, "Then I don't want the book." So we're so attached to this world, but actually this world is not where we're meant to be. And Krishna says once you achieve that abode, you don't need to come back here. So I'll just read the first part of the commentary of Srila Prabhupada's beautiful words on this verse. The spiritual world, the abode of the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna, which is known as Krishna Loka, Goloka Vrindavan, is described here. In the spiritual sky, there is no need of sunshine, moonshine, fire, or electricity, because all the planets are self-luminous. We have only one planet in this universe, the sun, which is self-luminous. But all the planets in the spiritual sky are self-luminous. The shining effulgence of all those planets, called Vaikunthas, constitutes the shining sky known as the Brahma Jyoti. Actually, the effulgence is emanating from the planet of Krishna, Goloka Vrindavan. Part of that shining effulgence is covered by the Mahatattva, the material world. Other than this, the major portion of that shining sky is full of spiritual planets, which are called Vaikunthas, chief of which is Goloka Vrindavan. Srila Prabhupada ki Om Jnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Once Giriraj Swami, he asked Srila Prabhupada, why did Krishna create the material world? And Prabhupada looked right back at him and said, because you wanted it. In other words, we don't strictly believe in creationism. Krishna has no agenda to create this world. But all Krishna is doing is responding to the desire of the living entity. When the living entity desires to be separate from Krishna, then Krishna doesn't force that living entity to remain in any situation. And so this material world is created as an opportunity for the living entity to act out all of its desires. Sometimes the material world is compared to a prison, a place that we come to for reformation. Sometimes the material world is compared to a hospital, a place that we come to because our consciousness isn't quite healthy. Jai Shri Shri Karunatithai Gaurachandra ki Jai. Sometimes the material world is compared to a school or a university because here we get karma, and karma, the lessons that we are given in order to elevate our consciousness. So in different ways the material world is compared to different things because this material world has its own function, has its own purpose. And therefore, when the living entity becomes wise, when the living entity becomes awakened, then the living entity says to itself, I don't think I'm in the right place. I don't think this is the place where I'm going to find satisfaction of heart. And at that time, the living entity begins the spiritual search. Until one comes to this point of becoming somewhat frustrated with the material world, there's no reason to begin a spiritual journey. Therefore, I can say, without a shadow of a doubt, that everyone in this room is frustrated. I'm reading your minds. To some extent, we must be frustrated, because if everything was perfect, if there was no problem, then why would we be looking for something higher? Therefore, all of us have the experience of being frustrated in some way, shape or form in the material world. Maybe it was a relationship let down. Maybe it was an achievement that you never achieved, or an achievement that you did achieve but didn't make you happy. Or maybe it was something you saw in the world, in the interactions around you. Something triggered it. Something made you realize, no, this is not the place. This can't be it. C.S. Lewis, the Christian writer, said, "If I find within myself a desire which no experience of this world can fulfill, then I must conclude I was made for another world." So when we come to that point of realizing, I don't think I'm going to fulfill it here, then we begin the spiritual search. So Krishna says such a person is actually very, very rare. Manushyanam sahasreshu kashkin yatati siddhaye. Out of many thousands of people in this world, one may come to the point of beginning their spiritual journey. And then Krishna says, out of those who begin their spiritual journey, maybe one may achieve some level of perfection. And out of many of those who have achieved some level of perfection, maybe one will understand me in truth. So it's a very, very rare person who will embark on the spiritual journey. And it's an even rarer person who will actually perfect the spiritual journey. So Krishna says that we're all here. We're all in a transit lounge, like I mentioned. We're in the river of names. We're just here for some time. And we're all on our journey. Another English writer says, we are not human beings having a spiritual experience. We're spiritual beings having a human experience. So we're spiritual beings. This human experience is just a chapter. But we're spiritual beings. And so what Krishna does is, along the way, he puts a few speed bumps in the road. He puts a few speed bumps in the journey of life. Aren't speed bumps annoying? But speed bumps are necessary, because if they're not there, then you just whiz across the road without being conscious. So the speed bumps make you stop. They make you become more aware, more conscious. They make you look at your surroundings. And in the same way, Krishna sends many experiences of this world which are like speed bumps, which make us think, oh, maybe there's more. And then when we do this, then we begin the spiritual path. And the first thing that all spiritual teachers will tell you, doesn't matter what tradition they're in, they will tell you that this is not our true home. No spiritual teacher will tell you otherwise. Every spiritual teacher will tell you that this nature that we're living right now is not our true home, and that we must reach there. So Krishna, when he wants to take us back to the spiritual world, he's working hard. He's doing many, many different things. So he gives us the scriptures. He gives us very, very realized personalities who remind us of that place. Krishna sends many, many experiences in our life which awake us to that place, awaken us to that place. But one other very, very amazing thing that Krishna sends to this world to remind us of the spiritual world is a replica of the spiritual world. Krishna actually takes a piece of the spiritual world and re-establishes that spiritual world in the material world to remind us of where we're meant to be. And such places are called tirthas. Have you heard this word? Tirtha literally means a bridge. So in this world there are many, many tirthas. And they are holy places. And what they do is they act as a bridge between the material world and the spiritual world. In other words, when you go to those holy places, even though they're not situated in one sense in the spiritual world, they are the spiritual world. And they give us a glimpse of the spiritual world even while we are in the material world. So If you go, for example, to modern day India, then there are many, many tirthas. If you go to the north of India, then there's Badrik Ashram, which is a tirtha. If you go to the south of India, then there's Rameshwaram, which is a tirtha. If you go to the east of India, then there is Jagannath Puri, which is a tirtha. If you go to the west of India, there is Dwaraka, which is a tirtha. These are the 4 directions of India which are considered to be the 4 what we call dhams. Dham also means a spiritual sacred place. But of all the sacred places in the entirety of the world, of all the tirthas, it's said that there is one tirtha or one sacred place which is the source of all other sacred places. And that one sacred place is Vrindavan. Vrindavan is said to be the source of all other holy places, and by going to this one holy place, you can get the benefit of going to any holy place, because everything is contained within Vrindavan or Vraja. And so, those who are wise take advantage of going to these places, because in these places one can begin to remind themselves of what the spiritual world is like. I don't know if you've ever heard of amnesia. Have you ever heard of amnesia? Amnesia is when someone wakes up, or it could be from a fall or a knock, something like that, and they forget who they are. They forget their identity, their name, where they live, what they used to do, who their family members are. They can't tell anything again. And in order to solve that amnesia, what they do is they take that person back to the places where they used to work, or the places where they used to go to school, or the places where they used to meet their friends. And just by being around those familiar situations, then what happens is that one regains their memory. Oh, I was this person. I was doing this before. This was my identity. So by exposing ourselves to certain environments, we can reawaken our memory of who we really are. And therefore, those who are on the spiritual path take time to go to the holy places. Now, the holy places are very, very powerful for a variety of reasons. The first thing is that obviously that holy place is already a replica of the spiritual world, so it has many things which remind you of the spiritual world. But the other reason why holy places are considered very, very powerful is because in holy places you meet holy people. You meet people who are not just living in that holy place, but are living in transcendence. And therefore, by going to those holy places and associating with those spiritual people, then one begins to gain an insight into that which they currently don't have any realization of. And therefore, have you ever had the experience of seeing something through someone else's eyes? Sometimes 2 people can look at the same thing and see something completely different. Have you noticed? Once there was a couple and they were looking at another couple, and this couple, the man came round to the passenger seat, he opened the door and the wife went in and he closed the door very nicely. And this couple was watching, and the wife said to the husband, "Just see, the marriage is new." And the husband looked back at the wife and said, "No, no, the car is new." 2 people can see the same thing, but see something completely different. Therefore, it depends whose eyes you're seeing through. Then you'll get a certain realization. So sometimes we don't see anything that special going on, but when you're with someone who has a very deep vision, then just by being in the proximity of that person, you begin to see something that otherwise you would never see. And therefore sometimes people were with Srila Prabhupada. And just by being close to Srila Prabhupada, they began to see things which otherwise they had never seen in their life. Because there's a sense that you see through the eyes of a great soul. And so, it's said that we go to the holy places because there are very holy people there. There are personalities who have dedicated their heart, their mind, their words to God. And therefore they are very close to God. It's said that they have a particular type of vision. Premanjana Churita Bhakti Vilochanena. They have eyes which are salved with the ointment of love. So their eyes are seeing through eyes of love. And therefore they're seeing that which we cannot see. And so Toshan Prabhu was asking, there are these great personalities in Vrindavan who love Krishna, who love God. And when we look at ourselves, we are very different. We are very far away from them. So how do we get inspired by them? How do we absorb their mood and at the same time not try to imitate them or be artificial, because we are not them? But at the same time we want to grasp the mood, the love, the emotion, the attachment that they have. So in Sanskrit there are two words. One word is anusarini and another word is anukarini. Anukarini means to imitate, and Anusharini means to follow in the footsteps, to imbibe the mood. And so when we look at the great souls, whether they're the holy people of Vrindavan or the great souls that we hear about in the ancient scriptures, then we don't try to imitate their activities. But what we try to do is understand what is their mood. And then we look at our life and we ask ourselves, how can I take that mood and imbibe it in my time, place and circumstance and according to something that's sustainable for me? So for example, the great souls in Vrindavan would take many, many severe vows of austerity. For example, Raghunath Das Goswami, every single day he would pay 1,000 obeisances to, was it to Govardhan? Anyway, to the Lord. 2,000 obeisances to the Vaishnavas. He would chant many, many rounds. He would sleep very, very little. And he would make these vows, and he said his vows were like lines on stone. So when we read that, then we try to understand what is the essence of that. That I have to be committed, that I have to be focused, that I have to apply myself, disregarding material comfort. But then what we do is we take all of those principles and then we look at our own life. In our own life, to pay 2,000 obeisances to the Vaishnavas every day may be not so practical. But we have to understand, I have to bow down. Yes, I must bow down in humility. So how can I do that? When will I do that? What is the mood that I will have whilst I'm doing that? And then to imbibe that humility in a way that is practical to us. So therefore, when we go to Vrindavan, what we're trying to do is not just hear the stories. We're not just trying to read about the characters who were living in Vrindavan, but we're trying to understand what was their spirit, what was their heart, what made them so special to Krishna. Why were they so dear to the Supreme Personality of Godhead? And then we have to ask ourselves, how can I mold my character in such a way to become such a person? They say, don't try to see God, but act in such a way that God will want to see you. And so, when we read about all these great personalities, we're asking ourselves the question, Where do I need to change? How can I improve? And how can I make my heart soft like their heart, so that Krishna will become very active in my life? And so we do this with guidance, with inspiration, and with maturity. And in this way, Vrindavan is a great inspiration for us, because we need examples. Everyone in the world needs a role model, right? But who are the role models that people follow today? Those role models aren't going to take them very, very far. But then for us, the role models are those individuals who are completely in love with Krishna, because their character speaks volumes. Everything that is written about in hundreds of pages of scriptures, everything that is talked about in thousands and hours of lectures, if you just observe the spirit of those who live in the holy places in devotion, then you can understand all of those lessons just by looking at their life. And so this is a great opportunity for all of us. So, yes, these are some thoughts. So Krishna is inviting us here. There's a beautiful place. There's no need for the sun there. There's no need for any illumination. Prabhupada says there's no need for electricity. Actually, there's no word, I don't think so, for electricity in the Sanskrit language. But just to make it understandable for us, because illumination in this world always comes from electricity, Prabhupada puts that into the translation. Srila Prabhupada is trying to teach us that there's no artificial needs there. Everything is going on beautifully, naturally, spontaneously, effortlessly by Krishna's plan. So we can go there. We can go to that place. But it requires one to make a special effort and to become qualified. To go to any place in this world, you need to get a visa. No visa, no entrance. So what is the visa to get into the spiritual world? It's not going to be how many rounds you've chanted in your life. It's not going to be what movement you were part of. It's not going to be any title that you were given. It's not going to be how many verses of the scriptures you memorized. None of that is going to count at the gates. What's going to count is how much love you have in your heart. The weight of your love will be the only thing that will tip the scale. And so we turn to those who have so much love. We don't have so much love. We are impoverished in love. So, yeah, it takes time. So, but at least we have great role models. We have great inspirations. Yeah, they're so in love. Uddhava was so in love with Krishna. I saw Vishaka here, so I remembered Uddhava. So Uddhava came to my mind. Once Uddhava, he saw a lady and he got attracted. And he said, how is it possible? How is it possible that I could get attracted to someone other than Krishna? He said, there can only be one explanation. This lady must be Krishna. And it was. It was Krishna. But the amazing thing is, he just had that strong realization, how can I can't be attracted. It's not possible. So we're attracted to so many things apart from Krishna. Hare Krishna. Okay, so maybe I, instead of giving a long lecture, maybe stop here and see whether you may have any thoughts, any feelings, any questions. Yes, thank you.
Maharaj, I have a question in the beginning of the lecture. I really wanted to know if you have, because I've asked it a few times, but I never get like a proper answer. Well, I'm not necessarily going to get a proper answer.
No pressure.
Satisfies my know, so once we go to Krishna, we never come back. Where do we come from? Our souls. And are all our souls, are they the same? Are we equal as in what we are, as our essence? And how is it possible then that ones are at one point and others at another point?
Okay, yes. Thank you for raising this question. How in the world did we get here? Okay, how to begin to answer this question. So let me first begin with some of the things that I'm sure you've already heard before, and then we'll develop the argument. In order for there to be love, there must be free will. No free will, no love. And therefore the world, the spiritual world, is revolving on free will. There's no force, there's no coercion, there's no insistence of Krishna for anyone to be there. So then at a certain point, Srila Prabhupada explains we develop a curiosity. Does it mean we had some dissatisfaction in the spiritual world? No, not necessarily. But because we have free will, it just means that there are options. And as soon as we begin to contemplate options and focus on that contemplation, then the opportunity has to open up for us to leave. So Srila Prabhupada seems to say to us that it's nothing other than just curiosity which brings us here. One Christian theologian, he gives an interesting argument. Because we may say, but that arrangement of Krishna to allow us to have free will brings us into a situation of great suffering. So one Christian theologian makes an interesting argument. He says that a seeming evil that God perpetrates can be justified if that seeming evil is superseded, is committed to avoid a greater evil. That's an interesting argument. Because then what the theologian goes on to say is that the greater evil than not allowing the living entity to come to the material world, the greater evil than that would be to take away free will. That's a greater evil. Because if you take away free will, then you take away the opportunity to fulfill the heart in a relationship of love. And so if you take away that, then you take away life itself. And therefore, a seeming evil of allowing the living entity to come here can be justified because it circumvents a greater evil, which is the Lord taking away our free will. And so we come to this material world and we experience whatever we experience here. Are all souls created equal? Yes. They're Sat, Chit, Ananda, they're of the same substance. Yet some souls, because of free will. Now you may say, why is it that some come and some don't? Well, that's the nature of free will. There's no, if I could give you an explanation behind that, it wouldn't be free will. Because there would be a cause to them making that decision. Do you understand? So this is the answer that Srila Prabhupada generally gave. Now, the plot thickens. Because Prabhupada did seemingly also make other statements that one cannot fall from the spiritual world. So how do we reconcile all of this? In an article called Conceiving the Inconceivable, Ravindra Swarup Prabhu gives an interesting explanation which for me is quite satisfying. And I'll try and share it with you. Should I go into the detail of this?
Yes.
Is it okay?
Yes.
It's not too technical. Okay, you asked for it. The material world is made up of different levels of planetary system. Agreed?
Yes.
We are right in the middle. We're in the earthly planet. Agreed?
Yeah.
Yes.
As you go up in the universe, time dilates. Understand? So when you're at the topmost planet in the material universe, you're in Brahmaloka. Agreed? Now, time dilates. So one day on Brahmaloka is like 6 months on the earth planet. Even Einstein talked about this, the relativity of time. Okay, so you get my point? As we go higher in the universe, time dilates. Then when you get to the edge of the material universe, time is 0. And when you go into the spiritual world, there's no time. There's no time in the spiritual world. So Ravindra Swarup Prabhu, he says, the reason why it's so hard to answer this question is because you're trying to answer it in a narrative which spans 2 different time dimensions. If I ask you the question, can you leave a place in which there's no time? What would your answer be? Can you leave a place where there's no time? If you say yes, my next question is, when? And can you re-enter a place in which there's no time? If you say yes, my question is, when? So in theory, you can't leave a timeless place. And in theory, you can't re-enter a timeless place. So when we kind of try to map this journey, and we were in the spiritual world, and then one day we fell, and then we met the Hare Krishnas, and then we went back, and then we lived happily. It doesn't really make sense, because you're trying to create a linear narrative to describe an event that's spanning 2 different time dimensions. So language cannot convey what's actually going on here. Language has deep limitation. For example, if I asked you, who came first, your child or you? Sorry, your child or the mother? The mother. Obviously. Wrong. Because until your child was born, you were not a mother. So I could make 2 statements. The mother comes before the child, and I'd be right. And I could make the complete opposite statement. The child comes before the mother, and I'd be right. And you would say, that's a contradiction, and you would be right. Kind of. So my point is, the English language, when we try to frame an event like the fall of the jiva and try to encapsulate it within a statement, you'll have the feelings that you're feeling. That I don't have a satisfactory answer. Trying to answer this question in a narrative that pins it down is a sure way to give yourself a headache. Because it's something, we have to always understand that language has its limitations. And so even amongst the teachers in the Vedic tradition, you will find that they describe this in very, very different ways. And perhaps that's because there are many, many different perspectives to it that can be reconciled when we go to a deeper level. But you may say, but they seem to say different things. But it doesn't matter, they can still coexist. For example, if I say to you, the pen is mightier than the sword. Agree? Yeah. But then what about if I say to you, actions speak louder than words? Agree? Yeah. True. Both are true in their own way. What about if I say to you, birds of a feather flock together? Yeah, true. But what about if I say to you, opposites attract? Yeah, true. What about if I say to you, too many cooks spoil the broth? True. But what about if I say to you, many hands make light work? True. So, English has its limitation. One statement can be true, and there can be a seeming different statement which is also true, because things are multidimensional and are happening. So, I'm sure I haven't satisfied you, but maybe there's something there. Would you like to respond to that?
I would like to ask one thing then concerning that.
Sure.
If there is no time here, and we wouldn't like leave
In the spiritual world,
the spiritual world,
mm-hmm.
is it then that the part of us that's subjected to time could experience this while we're still there? Or am I going too far?
So you're asking, do we literally leave the spiritual world, or is there like just some shadow aspect of us that's here while we're still remaining there?
Or just only the aspect that need to evolve of us? The purer part of us. Like,
Good point, but I've never read that. It's not described in that way. It's not described in that way, that there is a part of us which remains, a part of us which comes. We're a soul, we're an individual, sentient, living entity. And we come to the material world. It's described like that. We come to the material world. But at the same time, it's said that you can never really leave the spiritual world, as I said, because it's time. So how does that work? It's inconceivable. It's beyond logic. Because as I said, it's spanning different time dimensions. Thank you. Yes?
In the spiritual world, do we have an identity, a name and address or something like that, the way we have it here? What would be my identity?
Yeah, in the scriptures it's explained everyone has a svarup. Sva means your own and rupa means form. So it's explained that you can have different relationships with Krishna, as a servant, as a friend, as a parent, as a lover. And remember, this world is a photocopy. So everything you're doing in this world, you know, there are gatherings, there is singing, there are babies crying. It all happens up there as well. And we have our own spiritual identity, yes. So you have your identity, it's already there. You just need to rediscover it. Love is not something that we're gaining from somewhere else. It's already in your heart. Nitya Siddha Krishna Prem Sadhya Kabunoi Shravana Adi Sudachite Karaye Udoi. Eternal love for Krishna is established within your heart. You have a relationship with Krishna. So by the process of hearing and chanting, that is awakened. So spiritual life is about unforgetting God. You just got to stop forgetting Him. And just remember.
Maharaj, last question, please.
Okay.
If the spiritual world is self-illuminated, that means there's no night and day. How does Krishna have the rasa dance, which takes place at night?
Yeah, we're really going into realms that we can't. Can you guys ask some practical questions? Stop asking about the spiritual world. Find out when you get there. So how does it work with the self-illuminous spiritual planets? So we have to understand that there is one energy which is working in this world and another energy which is working in the spiritual world. In this world, the energy that's working overtime is called Mahamaya. If you're not sure what it is, just go out into Amsterdam town centre around 10 o'clock. Maybe it starts earlier here, I think, about 9, and you'll see people who are being subjected to Mahamaya. Right? There's an energy which seems to cover us. So in the spiritual world, it's said that all the activities of Krishna are being arranged by Yoga Maya. So although it's a self-luminous planet, Yoga Maya can create all kinds of different aesthetic backgrounds and sceneries and habitats for Krishna to perform his pastimes. And so by the arrangement of Yoga Maya, everything, the spiritual world is a place of unlimited possibility. We experience darkness in this world because there's limitation. But the darkness of the world in the spiritual world is created by Yoga Maya, not out of limitation, but to expand the pastimes and the pleasure of Krishna. So we can understand that by Yoga Maya anything can happen, because that energy works to cover. It may work to cover the sunlight, it work to cover one's intelligence, it may work to cover one's sense of relationship with someone. Whatever is required, Yoga Maya has got it covered. Sorry for the pun. I got my point. Is that alright? There's a lot of hands here, I don't know what to do. Like, it's getting quite late, yeah, and then we got Damodarastakam, and well, you know, sometimes you can't figure out in the head. Can't figure it out through questions and answers. We just got to sing for Krishna. So I can see, well, we'll come back, yes. I think I confuse people more, that's why there's so many hands. Well, today we talked about the spiritual world and how can we understand the spiritual world is beyond our conception, but still Krishna gives us a glimpse to whet our appetite to want to go back there. So good luck on the journey back to your real, true home. Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Hare Krishna.
Svayam Bhagavan Keshava Maharaja ki Jai.